The story doesn't end with the sound of money being printed. It begins again, heavier, darker, and more dangerous. Inside the Royal Mint of Spain, time has stopped for the hostages, for the robbers, and for the professor watching from outside. Every second feels like a battlefield, every breath like a gamble. The first heist had already shaken the country, but this was not the end. Not yet. What the world didn't see was how fragile the situation truly was. The robbers still wore their masks, still carried their guns, still stood tall, but under the surface, fear was creeping in like smoke through broken glass. Tokyo, restless and wild, paced across the grand hall. Her eyes never stopped moving, always searching, always suspicious. She loved Rio, but her love was fire, it burned bright, uncontrollable, and dangerous. Rio, in contrast, was innocence caught in the storm. He wanted peace, he wanted a way out, but every choice he made dragged him deeper into the darkness. Together, they were like sparks colliding with gasoline, beautiful but deadly. Berlin, ever the commander, tried to hold the group together. He believed discipline was survival. His voice was calm, but his rules were brutal. For him, there was no room for weakness, no space for mistakes. And yet, behind his cold exterior, there was a man carrying secrets. Secrets that would one day change the course of the heist forever. Nairobi, the heart of the group, whispered encouragement to the hostages. She smiled even when her heart trembled. She gave them hope, because hope was a weapon too. "We're all getting out of here alive," she promised, though she wasn't sure she believed her own words. And then there was Denver. His laugh echoed oddly in the tense silence, a reminder that even in chaos, humanity survives. His bond with Monica, the hostage who chose love over fear, was growing. At first, it was a spark hidden in shadows, but now it burned openly, dangerously. How long could they hide it? How long before love became their greatest weakness? Outside the mint, the professor was orchestrating everything. A man in the shadows, his mind worked like a machine. Every detail, every possibility, every outcome, he had planned for them all. But no plan, no matter how perfect, can account for human emotion. And that was the one thing he could not control. Inspector Raquel Murillo had become more than just an opponent. She was clever, patient, and deeply human. She studied the professor's moves not as an officer, but as a woman who had unknowingly stepped into his game. Every phone call between them was more than negotiation, it was a duel, a dance, a dangerous intimacy. And though she didn't yet know his true identity, her heart was already being pulled in his direction. The world outside the mint was changing too. The media painted pictures of the robbers as monsters, criminals without mercy. But slowly, whispers began to rise. People on the street started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, these masked figures were not villains, but symbols of rebellion. A resistance against the very system that had failed them. And that was the brilliance of the professor's plan. It wasn't just a heist, it was a story. A story the world could watch, interpret, and believe in. And in stories, perception is as powerful as reality. But inside the mint, reality was brutal. The air was heavy with tension. Every movement of the hostages was watched, every word between the robbers was measured. Trust was thinning. Fear was growing. And love, the one thing that should have been pure, was becoming dangerous. Tokyo and Rio clashed constantly. She wanted control, he wanted freedom. Berlin ruled with an iron hand, causing resentment among the group. Denver's laughter and love for Monica risked exposing them all. And Nairobi tried, desperately, to keep hope alive. The professor's voice came through the radio, calm and precise: stick to the plan. No matter what happens, the plan is your lifeline. His words were like oxygen, holding them together. But even oxygen can run out. And while the robbers struggled with their own demons, the police outside were preparing their next move. Raquel Murillo, torn between duty and doubt, began to see cracks in the system she served. The government wanted blood. The higher-ups wanted a quick resolution, even if it meant sacrificing innocent lives. But Raquel was different. She still believed in justice, in finding a way to end this without massacre. Yet the more she tried to understand the robbers, the more she unknowingly walked into the professor's trap. And in the shadows, the professor watched her every move, calculating, predicting. But for the first time, he felt something he hadn't planned for: connection. The kind of connection that could destroy even the most perfect plan. The city held its breath. The people waited. Inside the mint, every tick of the clock brought the robbers closer to freedom, or destruction. And then, it happened. A single choice. A moment of weakness. Something small, almost invisible. But in a game like this, even the smallest crack can shatter everything. The storm was coming. And no one, neither the robbers, nor the police, nor even the professor, was truly ready for it. The Royal Mint was a cage of gold and shadows. On the surface, everything still looked under control. The red jumpsuits, the masks, the guns, they projected strength. But behind those masks, cracks were spreading like fractures in glass. Tokyo's restless energy had turned volatile. She wanted action, movement, anything but silence. Her instincts screamed that standing still was more dangerous than running. She pushed Rio to escape with her, whispering plans in the corners of the mint, her eyes blazing with the desire to take control. But Rio, softer and more careful, resisted. He loved her, but his heart was torn between survival and loyalty to the group. Each time they clashed, their love turned into a battlefield. Berlin watched them both with icy disdain. To him, Tokyo's fire was a liability, and Rio's hesitation was weakness. Berlin believed in hierarchy, in order, in discipline. He had no patience for rebellion within the ranks. Yet his authority was slipping. Each decision he made felt heavier, more desperate. He was a man commanding a ship caught in a storm, steering with iron hands but knowing the waves could still tear it apart. Denver, caught between laughter and love, was becoming reckless. His secret relationship with Monica, now called Stockholm, was no longer a whisper but a visible truth. She wasn't just a hostage anymore. She had chosen him, chosen their side, even though it meant betraying her old life. Their stolen glances, their whispered promises, it was beautiful, yes, but dangerously obvious. Other hostages noticed. Some sympathized, others grew resentful. And within the group, suspicions rose like smoke. Nairobi tried to balance it all. She encouraged the team when spirits dipped, reminded them of the dream that had brought them together. For her, this heist wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, about proving that ordinary people could rise against a broken system. She mothered the hostages, cared for them, even joked with them. But deep down, she too carried fear, the fear that one mistake, one crack, could end it all. Meanwhile, outside the mint, the city was a theater of chaos. Protesters filled the streets, waving signs, chanting, painting murals of the red-suited robbers as heroes. To some, they were criminals. To others, revolutionaries. The world was watching, and every broadcast, every photograph, every story turned the heist into something bigger than money. It became a movement. And at the center of this storm stood the professor. Alone in his safe house, surrounded by maps, radios, and calculations, he was both mastermind and prisoner. Every plan he had crafted, every move he had anticipated, was being tested. His voice over the radio was calm, calculated, but behind his glasses his eyes burned with sleepless intensity. Inspector Raquel Murillo remained his greatest opponent, and his most dangerous connection. Every negotiation between them was layered. On the surface, it was police against criminal. But underneath, something else was forming. A bond neither of them could deny. Raquel was intelligent, empathetic, and stubborn. She didn't see the robbers as monsters, she saw people. And the more she listened, the more her doubts about her own system grew. The government and her superiors were pressuring her, demanding results, demanding violence. They wanted the robbers crushed, even if innocent lives were lost. But Raquel wasn't like them. She believed in humanity, in justice. That's why she clashed not only with the professor but with her own team. For the professor, this connection was a weapon, but also a weakness. He had always believed he could control every variable, every human behavior. But Raquel was unpredictable. With her, he found himself hesitating, making choices from his heart rather than his head. And in a game this dangerous, hesitation could be fatal. Inside the mint, tensions exploded. Tokyo, desperate for control, defied Berlin's authority. Arguments turned into shouting, shouting into threats. The group was splintering, each member pulled in a different direction. Some wanted to stick to the plan no matter what. Others whispered about escape, about freedom, about abandoning everything. And then came the mistake, the kind of mistake that rewrites the entire game. A moment of passion, a slip in discipline, a decision born not of strategy but of raw emotion. The police seized their chance, surrounding the mint with heavier force, preparing for a breach. Raquel, torn between orders and her instincts, found herself at the edge of betrayal, betrayal of the system she served, betrayal of the professor she had unknowingly begun to trust. The robbers, trapped inside, had no choice but to prepare for the storm. The walls that once felt like protection now felt like prison bars. Every hostage's breath sounded louder, every glance sharper, every second heavier. Tokyo's voice cut through the silence like fire, "We can't wait any longer. If we sit here, we die. We need to move. We need to fight." Berlin answered with cold steel in his tone, "We follow the plan. No one moves unless I say so. This is not chaos. This is war. Two leaders, two visions, and one fragile crew caught in between." The mint became a battlefield not only against the police outside but against the emotions tearing the group apart. Love, fear, ambition, and loyalty all collided under the fluorescent lights and painted walls. And the professor, watching from his distant sanctuary, realized the truth: even the most perfect plan can collapse when people's hearts betray their minds. The night grew darker. The city louder. The hostages more restless. And as the world held its breath, the heist stood on the edge of implosion. The storm was not coming anymore. The storm had arrived. The Royal Mint had become more than just a building, it was a living, breathing pressure cooker. Every second inside was hotter, sharper, more suffocating. The sound of distant helicopters circled like vultures above, and the hum of fluorescent lights flickered against the walls, making even shadows feel alive. Inside, the robbers were no longer just comrades, they were rivals in survival. Berlin's dominance was cracking. His voice, once filled with certainty, now carried a subtle tremor. He held on to authority like a king clutching a crown, but everyone could feel it slipping from his hands. Tokyo especially. Her eyes burned with rebellion. To her, Berlin was no longer a leader, he was a tyrant choking their chances. It was in that atmosphere of suffocating mistrust that the unthinkable happened. Tokyo, fiery and impulsive, made her move. With anger boiling in her chest, she challenged Berlin openly. Their argument turned the room into a courtroom where every robber became judge, jury, and executioner. Denver tried to mediate, Nairobi raised her voice to calm things, but Tokyo's fire couldn't be tamed. She shouted that Berlin was leading them all to death, that the plan was crumbling, that they had to fight their way out before it was too late. Berlin, cold and unflinching, didn't debate, he punished. His command was brutal. Tokyo was restrained, dragged out like a traitor, and in a shocking moment of cruelty, she was handed over to the police outside. A calculated sacrifice. The mint shuddered with the aftershocks of betrayal. Rio's heart shattered. Watching the woman he loved thrown away tore him apart. His screams, his pleas, they meant nothing to Berlin. In that instant, Rio wasn't just a robber, he was a broken boy whose love had been stolen from him. And the others? They watched in silence, their loyalty burning away in doubt. Tokyo, outside those red walls, was suddenly at the mercy of the police. For the first time since the heist began, she wasn't behind a mask, wasn't holding a gun, she was exposed. And the police pounced. They tried to break her, interrogating her, pressing her for weaknesses in the professor's plan. But Tokyo was fire. She gave them nothing. Inside the professor's safe house, panic rippled. This wasn't in the plan. His careful calculations had never accounted for Berlin's recklessness. He adjusted, strategized, his mind racing at impossible speeds. He still had Raquel to worry about, the inspector who was becoming dangerously entangled in his heart. Every interaction with her was a gamble, each word a trap he might set for himself. And as the hours stretched on, one question echoed louder than any gunshot: would they make it out alive, not just from the mint, but from each other? The night outside the Royal Mint was restless. Sirens wailed in the distance, floodlights carved deep scars into the darkness, and helicopters hovered like vultures waiting for a corpse. But it wasn't the police who made the first critical move, it was the professor. In his quiet hideout, with maps and monitors glowing in the dim light, his mind was a storm. Tokyo was gone. Berlin had overstepped. The team inside was breaking apart. For the first time since the heist began, his flawless plan carried cracks. And cracks, no matter how small, always spread. But the professor wasn't just a planner. He was a magician, an illusionist who knew how to bend reality. So he devised a counterattack. Using his mastery of psychological warfare, he planted misinformation, feeding the police false leads, trying to make them believe the team inside had lost control. If the police saw chaos, they would hesitate. And hesitation meant survival. But even magicians stumble. It happened when the professor, disguised once again as his civilian self, crossed paths with someone he never expected, a patrol officer wandering the forest near his safe house. One wrong movement, one careless mistake, and suspicion sparked. The officer noticed his nervousness, the mud on his shoes, the strange van parked nearby. It was small, almost nothing, but it was enough. For a man like the professor, almost nothing was lethal. Meanwhile, inside the mint, tension had become oxygen, thick, choking, unavoidable. Rio sat in silence, hollow, staring at the floor. Every breath he took was heavier than the last, haunted by Tokyo's absence. Nairobi tried to lift his spirit, to remind him that survival came first, but her words bounced off the walls of his grief. Berlin, on the other hand, was colder than ever. He wore his arrogance like armor, refusing to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, his decision had fractured the group beyond repair. To him, the heist was not just about gold, but about legacy. And legacies, he believed, required sacrifice. Denver and Stockholm, caught in their forbidden love, found small escapes in stolen glances. For them, the mint wasn't just a prison. It was also the only place their love was real, untainted by the outside world. But even love became fragile in that storm. Stockholm feared Arturo's manipulations, his whispers to the hostages, his promises of freedom. She knew Arturo's poison was spreading, and sooner or later, someone would bite. Outside, the police smelled opportunity. With Tokyo in their custody, they launched a new wave of psychological warfare. They paraded her in front of the cameras, using her image to weaken the robbers' morale. They promised her leniency if she revealed details about the professor, about the plan, about the exit. But Tokyo was unbreakable. Even in chains, her spirit was a flame that refused to die. And that flame would soon burn brighter. Because Tokyo wasn't destined to stay captured. The professor, shaken but relentless, knew she had to come back. Not just for the plan, but for the soul of the team. Without her, the group inside was collapsing. Without her, Rio was a ghost. So he set the pieces in motion. With surgical precision, he prepared her rescue, exploiting the blind spots of the police, manipulating their greed, their arrogance. To the outside world, he was invisible. To his team, he was still the unseen guardian. But to himself, for the first time, he felt human. Vulnerable. Afraid. Back in the Mint, Nairobi's leadership spark grew brighter. She organized the workers to keep production going, turned chaos into structure, tried to restore dignity to a plan that was unraveling. For the hostages, her softer tone was a relief compared to Berlin's cruelty. They saw her as the mother of the group, strict but caring. And that made Arturo's rebellion harder to spread. Yet Berlin, watching her, saw something else. A rival. Someone who could steal his crown. His gaze followed Nairobi like a shadow, waiting, calculating, deciding when to strike. The silence of the Mint was pierced when the police launched a false assault, smoke, gunfire, chaos pounding against the walls. Hostages screamed, the robbers scrambled, weapons were raised. For minutes, the world seemed to end. But it was all a trick. The police were testing them, measuring their strength, probing for weakness. And in those moments of fake war, Berlin's grip tightened again. He reminded everyone who gave the orders, who pulled the strings. His voice thundered, his authority loomed. And though they hated him, they obeyed. The night ended, but peace never came. Inside, exhaustion ate at their souls. Outside, the police sharpened their knives. And in his safe house, the professor replayed every second of his near discovery in the forest, his heart racing even in the silence. He couldn't afford another slip. One mistake was human. 2 mistakes would be fatal. But fate had other plans. Because soon, the professor's carefully constructed world would collide with the one thing no mastermind can control, love. And when love enters the battlefield, strategy becomes fragile, and even the strongest masks begin to crack. The air outside the Royal Mint felt heavier that morning. A storm was brewing, not of rain or thunder, but of plans, betrayals, and desperate hope. For days, the robbers had been suffocating under the weight of their mistakes, their hearts crushed by Tokyo's absence. But storms, no matter how violent, always bring change. Inside the Mint, silence clung to the walls like a second skin. The machines still roared, printing bills, but their steady rhythm couldn't mask the emptiness within the group. Rio had become a ghost. He barely ate, barely spoke, his eyes hollow as if a part of his soul had been ripped away. Nairobi tried to keep him grounded, but even her fierce spirit couldn't fill the void. Without Tokyo, Rio wasn't Rio. Berlin, on the other hand, thrived in her absence. With one voice silenced, his orders carried more weight. He walked the Mint like a king among servants, his arrogance filling every corridor. Yet even kings know when their crowns are slipping, and Berlin could feel the undercurrents, Nairobi's quiet defiance, Denver's distracted loyalty, Stockholm's soft rebellion. Control was his obsession, and he clung to it with both hands. But far from the Mint, in the depths of police custody, Tokyo's fire refused to die. She sat in her cell, her body bruised but her spirit sharp, sharper than ever. The police tried everything, threats, promises, the illusion of mercy, but Tokyo was unshakable. She had lived too much, lost too much, to break now. If anything, her captivity hardened her resolve. She wasn't just waiting to be saved, she was waiting to fight. And the professor knew it. In his hideout, he drew the rescue plan like a master artist. Every line, every movement, every second was crafted with precision. His heart, however, betrayed him. Fear gnawed at him, not just fear of failure, but fear of what losing Tokyo would mean for Rio, for the team, for himself. She wasn't just a piece of the puzzle anymore. She was the flame that kept the heist alive. So the professor became a ghost in the streets, slipping through shadows, planting distractions, bribing, deceiving, manipulating. The police thought they had Tokyo. In reality, she was already halfway gone. And then it happened. In the dead of night, the police convoy carrying Tokyo cut through the streets, headlights slicing the darkness. To them, it was routine, just another prisoner transport. To the professor, it was a battlefield. His trap had been set, his timing flawless. The ambush was like lightning, sudden, blinding, unstoppable. Explosions shattered the night, smoke swallowed the road, and gunfire echoed through the city. The police scrambled, blinded, disoriented. And in the chaos, Tokyo emerged, running, fighting, her spirit unleashed. For a moment, she looked less like a captive and more like a warrior reclaiming her throne. By the time the smoke cleared, she was gone, vanished into the shadows, back into the arms of her people. When Tokyo re-entered the mint, it was like oxygen filling starving lungs. Rio's face lit up for the first time in days, his heart pounding with relief and disbelief. He ran to her, holding her as if letting go would kill him. The others felt it too, their spirit reignited, their unity restored. Even Nairobi, who had held strong, let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. But not everyone welcomed her return. Berlin watched her like a predator, his jaw tight, his eyes burning. To him, Tokyo's comeback wasn't a blessing. It was a threat. A reminder that his control was slipping, that the professor's influence was stronger than his. He masked his anger with a smile, but beneath it, a storm brewed darker than ever. For the hostages, Tokyo's return was a double-edged sword. Some saw it as a crack in the robber's armor, proof that even they weren't invincible. Arturo, ever the manipulator, whispered again, urging rebellion, fanning flames of doubt. But others looked at her with fear, knowing her presence meant the heist was far from over. The police, meanwhile, were humiliated. Their custody broken, their prisoner stolen. It wasn't just a defeat, it was a spectacle, a public embarrassment broadcast across the nation. Inspector Raquel, caught between her duty and her growing connection to the professor, felt the walls closing in. Every move the professor made was sharper, faster, smarter than theirs. And for the first time, she began to question, not just his methods, but her own loyalty. In the mint, the night turned electric. Tokyo's fire clashed with Berlin's ice, Nairobi's order clashed with chaos, Rio's heart clashed with fear. Yet in that storm, something undeniable happened, the heist came alive again. And as the bills kept printing, as the hours kept slipping, one truth became clear, this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about power, survival, love, betrayal. It was about rewriting the rules of the game. But games, no matter how cleverly played, always demand a price. And soon, every one of them would pay. The night inside the Royal Mint was heavy, almost suffocating, as if the very walls could sense the storm about to break. Tokyo's return had sparked a fire in the group, but fire doesn't just give warmth, it also burns. And Berlin could feel the flames licking at his control. He stood tall, immaculate as always, his suit pressed, his posture commanding. But his eyes, cold and sharp, never left Tokyo. She had walked back into the mint with the confidence of a conqueror, embraced by Rio, celebrated by the team. To Berlin, it felt like betrayal. He had kept the group together in her absence, commanded order, and now she was stealing it all away with a single smile. Tokyo, however, wasn't looking for his approval. She didn't need it. She was the heartbeat of the heist, and she knew it. Where Berlin used intimidation, she used passion. Where he ruled with fear, she inspired loyalty. And that, Berlin realized, was far more dangerous. The tension between them spilled into every decision. When a hostage moved too slowly, Berlin barked orders with threats. Tokyo intervened with fire, daring him to cross her. When Nairobi suggested printing more money, Berlin calculated, but Tokyo demanded. It was a clash not just of strategy, but of wills. And every clash left cracks in the group's fragile unity. Denver, caught between the two, tried to focus on his own world. His love for Stockholm was growing into something undeniable. The once timid secretary now carried a quiet strength, her eyes softer but her heart braver. With every whispered word, every stolen glance, Denver's feelings deepened. For the first time, his dreams stretched beyond the mint's walls. Stockholm wasn't just a hostage anymore, she was his future, his reason to fight. But their secret didn't stay hidden. Arturo, always scheming, saw everything. He watched Stockholm's subtle smiles, Denver's protective glances, and he stored them like weapons. Arturo wasn't just a hostage anymore, he was a snake, slithering through shadows, waiting to strike. Meanwhile, outside the mint, the professor's world was unraveling. Raquel was no longer just a rival. She had become something more, a connection, a temptation, a mirror of the man he could have been. Their conversations blurred the line between truth and lies, between duty and desire. She felt drawn to him, to the mystery, to the mind that always seemed 10 steps ahead. But with every step closer, she also felt the ground beneath her cracking. The professor, torn between his plan and his heart, found himself in dangerous territory. He had built the heist on logic, on precision, on a heart of steel. But Raquel was melting that steel, bit by bit. And the closer she came, the more exposed he became. Inside the mint, the cracks widened. Nairobi, once a soldier of Berlin's order, now leaned closer to Tokyo's fire. She believed in Tokyo's vision, in her courage. Nairobi was tired of Berlin's arrogance, his obsession with control. She wanted equality, respect, a team that listened instead of obeyed. Berlin saw it. He felt it. And it enraged him. One evening, under the fluorescent lights of the mint, it boiled over. Berlin and Tokyo stood face to face, their voices sharp enough to cut through steel. He accused her of recklessness, of being a liability, of jeopardizing everything they had built. She fired back with venom, calling him a dictator, a coward hiding behind rules. The air between them crackled like a live wire, every word threatening to ignite an explosion. The hostages watched, wide-eyed, sensing the shift. Some felt hope. If the robbers fought among themselves, maybe they had a chance. Arturo whispered again, urging rebellion, fanning the embers of resistance. Rio, torn between his love for Tokyo and his loyalty to the group, stood frozen. Denver clenched his fists, ready to step in if things went too far. Nairobi's voice finally cut through, strong and unwavering, demanding peace. But peace was only an illusion now. For the first time, Berlin's control faltered, not because of a police move, not because of a hostage escape, but because of Tokyo's defiance. And in that moment, the group realized something terrifying. The greatest threat to the heist might not be outside the mint, but inside it. Outside, the world was shifting too. The people of Spain were divided. Some saw the robbers as villains, criminals holding innocents hostage. But others began to see something different. Rebels fighting a corrupt system, heroes in masks standing against the powerful. The red jumpsuits and Salvador Dali masks became symbols, spreading through the streets, whispered about in homes, debated on television. The heist was no longer just a crime. It was becoming a revolution. And revolutions are never clean. As the clock ticked forward, the stakes grew higher, the lines blurred deeper, and the heist edged closer to chaos. Berlin's pride, Tokyo's fire, Nairobi's vision, Denver's love, Stockholm's courage, Arturo's schemes, the professor's heart, all colliding, all tearing at the fragile thread that held them together. And somewhere in that chaos, the first signs of betrayal began to bloom. The air inside the Royal Mint felt heavier than ever, as if every breath carried the weight of what was about to happen. The group's unity was cracking, and the sound of those fractures echoed louder than the printing machine spitting out bills. Berlin's authority was no longer absolute, and Tokyo's return had set sparks flying. But while the robbers fought among themselves, Arturo was plotting in silence. For days, he had been whispering to the hostages, planting seeds of rebellion. He promised them freedom, hope, safety, all if they followed his lead. He painted the robbers as fractured, weak, distracted. And little by little, he gathered believers. Stockholm, however, wasn't among them. Her heart had shifted, she no longer looked at Arturo as her savior. Her eyes followed Denver, her voice softened when he was near. Arturo noticed, and it poisoned him. One evening, Arturo made his move. He rallied a small group of hostages, urging them to escape. The plan was reckless, desperate, but desperation was Arturo's fuel. As the hostages stirred, sneaking glances at the armed robbers, tension reached a breaking point. And then, it happened. A sudden rush. A shout. Hostages sprinted toward the doors, Arturo leading the charge. Chaos erupted in an instant. Tokyo spun around, gun raised, her voice sharp as thunder. Denver shouted, blocking paths, while Rio fumbled to react. Nairobi cursed under her breath, trying to contain the wave of bodies. Berlin appeared like a storm, his fury unmatched. His voice cut through the chaos, commanding silence. His gun was steady, his face merciless. The hostages froze under his gaze, fear rooting them in place. Arturo, however, didn't stop. He lunged forward, screaming for freedom. And then, the world slowed. Berlin raised his weapon, his finger tightening. But before he could fire, Denver stepped in, his heart pounding. He couldn't let Stockholm see blood spill in front of her eyes, not Arturo's, not anyone's. His plea, raw and desperate, broke through for a moment. The escape failed. Arturo was dragged back, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. His whispered promises turned to curses, venom spilling from his mouth. He looked at Denver, at Stockholm, and hatred burned brighter than ever. He had lost her once, and now, in his mind, Denver had stolen everything. Arturo vowed silently that he would not leave the Mint defeated. If he couldn't escape, he would destroy from within. The hostages returned to their corners, shaken, silent. But something irreversible had happened, the fragile line between order and chaos had thinned, and everyone knew it could snap at any second. Meanwhile, beyond the Mint's stone walls, another battle raged. Raquel was unraveling. Her instincts screamed that something wasn't right. The mysterious man she had come to know, the one who made her laugh, who listened, who seemed so achingly human, was slipping through her fingers. She felt drawn to him, and yet, with every step closer, she felt betrayal's shadow lurking. And then, the realization hit. Piece by piece, she connected the dots. The times he disappeared, the way he spoke with insight into the case, the strange coincidences. When she finally put the picture together, it left her breathless. The man she trusted, the man she perhaps loved, was the professor himself. Her world shattered. Anger, heartbreak, disbelief, it all collided in her chest. The man who had stolen her heart had also stolen her trust, and worse, he was orchestrating the very heist she was sworn to stop. But Raquel wasn't just a woman in love, she was a cop. And though her heart screamed for him, her badge demanded justice. Inside the Mint, the robbers were unaware of this storm gathering outside. They focused on money, on plans, on survival. But cracks deepened with every passing hour. Berlin watched Tokyo with growing disdain. Nairobi quietly planned her own way of leading. Denver and Stockholm's love grew bolder, more visible, while Rio's blind loyalty to Tokyo made him unpredictable. The professor, distracted by Raquel, was losing his edge. His once flawless timing faltered, his calm demeanor tested. Every phone call with Raquel was a battlefield of hidden truths and half-lies. And though he tried to keep control, her discovery loomed like a blade above his head. The heist was supposed to be perfect, cold, calculated, unshakable. But now, it was bleeding emotion. Love, betrayal, rage, hope, they all tangled together, pulling the plan off course. As Arturo licked his wounds and whispered venom to the hostages, as Berlin and Tokyo stared each other down like predators, as Raquel prepared to confront the professor, the walls of the Royal Mint seemed to tremble. And somewhere in the chaos, destiny was shifting. The heist was no longer just about money, it was about survival, power, and the hearts of everyone caught in its fire. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. The night was cold, but the tension inside the Royal Mint burned hotter than fire. Every breath carried the weight of betrayal, suspicion, and fear. The fragile alliances that had held the group together were breaking apart. And now, it was no longer a question of whether chaos would erupt, it was a matter of when. Berlin stood in the center of the Mint like a general before a mutiny. His eyes scanned the room, sharp and unforgiving. He had seen the rebellion forming, the whispers growing louder, the stares filled with defiance. And at the center of it all was Tokyo. She didn't cower. She didn't yield. She met his gaze with the fire of someone who refused to be broken. "You think you can run this heist better than me?" Berlin's voice thundered, echoing against the high walls. "You think discipline is optional?" Tokyo's smirk was dangerous, the kind that carried both courage and recklessness. "No, Berlin. I think leadership is earned, not forced." Her words cut deeper than any weapon. Nairobi shifted uneasily. She had always resented Berlin's authoritarian rule, and Tokyo's defiance sparked something in her too. But siding with Tokyo now could mean bloodshed. Denver tightened his grip on his rifle, his eyes darting between them, torn between loyalty and survival. And then it happened. A sudden explosion of anger, Berlin lunged forward, his hand striking Tokyo, his fury unleashed. The room erupted as the others pulled them apart, shouting, guns raised, trust shattering into pieces. The hostages cowered in terror, their eyes wide as the robbers turned on each other. Berlin, breathing heavily, declared his authority once more. "This is my command. Anyone who dares cross me will face the same fate." His voice dripped with venom, but the seed of rebellion had already been planted. Tokyo's pride refused to bow. Her spirit was too wild, too fierce. And Berlin knew it. He realized in that moment that her presence was no longer just a challenge, it was a threat to everything. He made a decision that stunned them all: Tokyo would be exiled. The plan was brutal. She would be sent outside, into the hands of the police. Exile wasn't just punishment, it was a death sentence. Tokyo's eyes burned with fury and disbelief as they forced her toward the doors. "You'll regret this, Berlin. All of you will," she spat, her voice trembling with both rage and heartbreak. Denver tried to intervene, his loyalty pulling him toward her, but Berlin's iron grip and authority overruled. Nairobi's protests fell on deaf ears. Rio, desperate and broken, begged for her life, but his pleas were drowned out by Berlin's cold command. The doors opened. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then, with a brutal shove, Tokyo was gone. Outside, chaos awaited. Police swarmed, their guns raised, their orders sharp. Tokyo, forced into the open, found herself in the eye of the storm. Bullets ripped through the air, shouts filled the night, and the world exploded into violence. Back inside, Rio collapsed in despair. His cries echoed against the walls, raw and painful. He cursed Berlin, cursed the heist, cursed everything. His young heart, once filled with love and dreams, shattered in an instant. But the storm didn't stop there. Far away, the professor faced a storm of his own. Raquel had pieced the puzzle together, and now, standing in front of him, she carried both her badge and her broken heart. "You," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's you." The professor tried to stay calm, his mind racing. He had prepared for every possible scenario in the heist, every move the police could make, but not this. Not love colliding with truth. Raquel's hands shook as she held her gun, torn between duty and desire. "Tell me it's not true. Tell me you haven't been lying to me all this time." But silence was louder than any answer. His eyes, filled with both sorrow and sincerity, gave her the truth she dreaded. Her heart shattered, but her resolve hardened. She had fallen in love with the enemy, the mastermind. And now she had to choose, the badge or her heart. Inside the Mint, the group was fracturing beyond repair. Rio's grief made him reckless. Nairobi simmered with frustration at Berlin's tyranny. Denver's love for Stockholm made him question every order. And Berlin, for all his iron will, was slowly losing control. The exile of Tokyo wasn't the end, it was the spark. A spark that would ignite fires no one could put out. As Tokyo fought for her life outside, as Raquel fought against her heart, as Berlin fought to hold power, the heist teetered on the edge of collapse. The plan was crumbling. The family was breaking. And the world was watching. The silence after Tokyo's exile was heavier than gunfire. Every corner of the Royal Mint seemed to echo with her absence. Rio sat in despair, his trembling hands clutching the walkie-talkie as though her voice might suddenly break through. But all he heard was static, a cruel reminder that she was gone. Berlin, ever the dictator, walked among the group with renewed authority. His cold stare silenced protests, his commands unchallenged. From this moment, he declared, there will be no more defiance. We finish this heist or we die trying. But even as he spoke, unease rippled through the crew. Trust was gone, unity shattered, and doubt poisoned the air. Meanwhile, outside, Tokyo was a woman reborn. The police thought they had captured her, cornered her, crushed her spirit. But they underestimated the fire in her veins. As officers swarmed, she saw an opening, a motorcycle. With ferocious courage, she seized it, the roar of the engine slicing through the chaos. Bullets chased her, sirens wailed, but Tokyo flew like a storm unleashed. Her heart pounded with vengeance. She wasn't running away. She was coming back. Inside, Rio broke. His grief transformed into anger, his voice trembling but sharp. Berlin has destroyed us. First he plays with our lives, now he throws Tokyo out like she's nothing. This isn't leadership, it's suicide. His words cracked the fragile silence, sparking arguments that nearly erupted into violence. Nairobi stepped in, her own patience gone. Berlin, we're not your soldiers. We're a team, or at least, we were supposed to be. Berlin's smirk was venomous. A team needs order. Without discipline, we are animals. And animals die quickly. He turned away, but the damage was done. And then, like thunder, Tokyo returned. The front doors of the Mint exploded open, and there she was, riding the motorcycle straight through, bullets whizzing around her. Dust, smoke, and fury filled the air as she slid the bike to a halt, guns blazing, her eyes burning with rage. For a moment, time froze. The hostages screamed. The crew gasped. And Berlin's face turned pale. Tokyo was back. Chaos erupted instantly. She didn't come quietly, she came like a storm. The police had chased her, but she had outrun them. She crashed back into the Mint like a warrior reclaiming her throne. Guns raised, adrenaline rushing, she looked Berlin straight in the eyes. Did you miss me? Her words were poison and promise all at once. Rio collapsed with relief, tears streaming down his face. He ran to her, embracing her like he'd been given life again. Nairobi's grin betrayed her joy at Berlin's humiliation. Denver let out a laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. Even the professor, listening from outside, couldn't hide the pride in his voice when he whispered into the earpiece, "Welcome back, Tokyo." But Berlin's fury was volcanic. His control had been challenged, shattered, stomped on in front of everyone. He pulled out his gun, the barrel aimed directly at her. The room went silent again, every heart pounding, every finger twitching near a trigger. "Leave again," Berlin hissed, "and I will make sure you never come back." Tokyo didn't flinch. She raised her chin, her voice steady. "You can try. But this heist doesn't belong to you. It belongs to all of us." The standoff was electric, a moment where life and death balanced on the edge of a whisper. And though no bullets were fired, one thing was clear: Berlin's grip on power was broken. But outside the Mint, another storm brewed. Raquel, torn between her duty as a police inspector and the love she felt for the professor, made her choice. She confronted him in secret, her gun heavy in her hand, her voice trembling with betrayal. "You've lied to me. You've played with me. Tell me, was any of it real?" The professor's calm exterior cracked. For the first time, he seemed vulnerable. "Raquel, everything I said to you was real. I love you." His words weren't part of the plan. They were raw, human, uncalculated. And that made them dangerous. Raquel's eyes filled with tears. Her heart wanted to believe him, but her badge, her oath, screamed otherwise. She lowered her weapon but not her guard. "If you truly love me, surrender. End this madness before more lives are lost." But the professor knew surrender wasn't an option. He looked at her, his voice soft but resolute. "I can't." Back inside the Mint, the crew gathered around Tokyo, their whispers buzzing like electricity. With her return, hope surged, rebellion reignited. Nairobi leaned in, her eyes gleaming. "Maybe it's time we take this heist back. No more dictatorships. No more Berlin." The hostages, watching all of this unfold, realized something vital: the robbers were no longer a united front. Cracks had turned into fractures, and fractures were turning into breaks. It was only a matter of time before the whole structure collapsed. And in the chaos, Arturo, the so-called hero among hostages, began plotting again. He whispered to Monica, still chained by her love for Denver, still torn between freedom and desire. "We have to escape. This is our only chance. They're falling apart." The air inside the Mint was thick with tension, betrayal, and brewing mutiny. Tokyo's return had changed everything. The group was divided. The professor's love story was at the brink of disaster. And outside, the police were tightening their net. The heist was spinning out of control. And the storm had only just begun. The Royal Mint had become more than just a building, it was a living, breathing pressure cooker. Every second inside was hotter, sharper, more suffocating. The sound of distant helicopters circled like vultures above, and the hum of fluorescent lights flickered against the walls, making even shadows feel alive. Inside, the robbers were no longer just comrades, they were rivals in survival. Berlin's dominance was cracking. His voice, once filled with certainty, now carried a subtle tremor. He held on to authority like a king clutching a crown, but everyone could feel it slipping from his hands. Tokyo especially. Her eyes burned with rebellion. To her, Berlin was no longer a leader, he was a tyrant choking their chances. It was in that atmosphere of suffocating mistrust that the unthinkable happened. Tokyo, fiery and impulsive, made her move. With anger boiling in her chest, she challenged Berlin openly. Their argument turned the room into a courtroom where every robber became judge, jury, and executioner. Denver tried to mediate, Nairobi raised her voice to calm things, but Tokyo's fire couldn't be tamed. She shouted that Berlin was leading them all to death, that the plan was crumbling, that they had to fight their way out before it was too late. Berlin, cold and unflinching, didn't debate. He punished. His command was brutal. Tokyo was restrained, dragged out like a traitor, and in a shocking moment of cruelty, she was handed over to the police outside. A calculated sacrifice. The Mint shuddered with the aftershocks of betrayal. Ryo's heart shattered. Watching the woman he loved thrown away tore him apart. His screams, his pleas, they meant nothing to Berlin. In that instant, Ryo wasn't just a robber, he was a broken boy whose love had been stolen from him. And the others? They watched in silence, their loyalty burning away in doubt. Tokyo, outside those red walls, was suddenly at the mercy of the police. For the first time since the heist began, she wasn't behind a mask, wasn't holding a gun, she was exposed. And the police pounced. They tried to break her, interrogating her, pressing her for weaknesses in the professor's plan. But Tokyo was fire. She gave them nothing. Inside the professor's safe house, panic rippled. This wasn't in the plan. His careful calculations had never accounted for Berlin's recklessness. He adjusted, strategized, his mind racing at impossible speeds. He still had Raquel to worry about, the inspector who was becoming dangerously entangled in his heart. Every interaction with her was a gamble, each word a trap he might set for himself. The Royal Mint had become more than just a building, it was a living, breathing pressure cooker. Every second inside was hotter, sharper, more suffocating. The sound of distant helicopters circled like vultures above, and the hum of fluorescent lights flickered against the walls, making even shadows feel alive. Inside, the robbers were no longer just comrades, they were rivals in survival. Berlin's dominance was cracking. His voice, once filled with certainty, now carried a subtle tremor. He held on to authority like a king clutching a crown, but everyone could feel it slipping from his hands. Tokyo especially. Her eyes burned with rebellion. To her, Berlin was no longer a leader, he was a tyrant choking their chances. It was in that atmosphere of suffocating mistrust that the unthinkable happened. Tokyo, fiery and impulsive, made her move. With anger boiling in her chest, she challenged Berlin openly. Their argument turned the room into a courtroom where every robber became judge, jury, and executioner. Denver tried to mediate, Nairobi raised her voice to calm things, but Tokyo's fire couldn't be tamed. She shouted that Berlin was leading them all to death, that the plan was crumbling, that they had to fight their way out before it was too late. Berlin, cold and unflinching, didn't debate. He punished. His command was brutal. Tokyo was restrained, dragged out like a traitor, and in a shocking moment of cruelty, she was handed over to the police outside. A calculated sacrifice. The Mint shuddered with the aftershocks of betrayal. Ryo's heart shattered. Watching the woman he loved thrown away tore him apart. His screams, his pleas, they meant nothing to Berlin. In that instant, Ryo wasn't just a robber, he was a broken boy whose love had been stolen from him. And the others? They watched in silence, their loyalty burning away in doubt. Tokyo, outside those red walls, was suddenly at the mercy of the police. For the first time since the heist began, she wasn't behind a mask, wasn't holding a gun, she was exposed. And the police pounced. They tried to break her, interrogating her, pressing her for weaknesses in the professor's plan. But Tokyo was fire. She gave them nothing. Inside the professor's safe house, panic rippled. This wasn't in the plan. His careful calculations had never accounted for Berlin's recklessness. He adjusted, strategized, his mind racing at impossible speeds. He still had Raquel to worry about, the inspector who was becoming dangerously entangled in his heart. Every interaction with her was a gamble, each word a trap he might set for himself.